It's finished. TCU's regular season is over. They are 8-4.
Thought we were going a different direction.
Christ has risen. No, it's just the start of Advent, Melissa. We've got plenty of time for that. But right now, we're going to talk about Cincinnati on this episode of Frogs Insider. Hey, Frog fans, welcome into another episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. Jamie Plunkett here, alongside Melissa Treebwasser, as always, ready to talk to you about TCU's final regular season game, a 20-13 win over the Cincinnati Bearcats in the snow. We got a little snow game, Melissa.
A little snow game, I know.
It's kind of
cool.
fun.
It's cute.
Saw some photos of some guys doing some snow angels after the fact. TCU gets to 8-4, 6-3 in Big 12 play. They officially finish 6th in a very topsy-turvy Big 12. We're going to talk about what that means, what our takeaways are from an 8-4 season, kind of just a general season in review. After we get into a breakdown of the game itself, because TCU did play football, they did win a football game, and we should be, I guess, happy about that. Mm-hmm. I'm pleased, frankly,
absolutely.
with a road win in conference. I think that's always a good thing. And then we're going to hop into a little bit of hoops talk on this episode as well. But Melissa, first and foremost, you went home for the holidays. How was Thanksgiving back in Cali?
There was an atmospheric river that had overtaken Northern California, which is fun. My sister's heat was out the first night. I was sleeping on an air mattress with they were not in the air mattress, but in the same home as a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old who start their morning at like 5:45, which is later than you started your morning on Thanksgiving and recorded a podcast. So I should be thankful. But it was great to see my family. We went out to dinner for Thanksgiving, something we hadn't really done before. It was a delight. There was no stressed out mom in the kitchen, no stressed out Megan in the kitchen, no dishes afterward. Nice. It was very non-traditional, and I certainly missed my Thanksgiving sides. Mm-hmm. But all in all, had a very easy travel experience other than having to circle the tarmac or circle the airport for about an hour before landing in San Francisco. But other than that, very, very pleasant experience, and was home in time. I got to watch and listen to the TCU women's game at the airport on Friday, and got home in time to watch football and basketball on Saturday. So felt good about the way things went. How did this 4 a.m. turkey come out for you? What were the results?
Turkey was great.
Yeah.
Delicious, juicy, excellent. 18-pound turkey, 9 hours. First 6 on a charcoal grill.
Okay.
With wood chips.
Okay.
Offset heat, smoke. Smoking that bad boy. Applying apple cider vinegar every 30 minutes. Rotating it a quarter turn every 30 minutes. Just methodical. It's a labor of love. And then I got really tired right after I finished doing the podcast. So about an hour after I got everything done for the show, I went ahead and just threw it in the oven at 225 for the last 3 hours. Just to let it maintain. And last year I put it on the smoker for the full 9, and I over smoked it a little bit. It was too smoky. This year it was the perfect smoke. Delicious. People were pleased.
Congratulations.
I also got some mac and cheese done, got some mashed potatoes done, got a little strawberry rhubarb cobbler done.
Oh, wow.
Some homemade gravy, some homemade cranberry sauce. We just did it all up.
Jamie, not to put you on the spot, but where was my invite? I might not have traveled home
you went to Cali.
That was an option. Yeah, you might have kept me.
You could have come hung out with over at my dad's house, and
I met your dad. He's a delight. Would have loved that.
He's a delight. He's got 200 bottle wine fridges out in the garage.
Okay.
We would have been well taken care of.
Again,
he's got all the brown liquor you could possibly want. I personally went with the eggnog Bailey's combo a couple of times. Went back to that well a few times on Thanksgiving Day. Didn't take a nap, surprisingly enough.
Okay.
Stayed up from Wednesday morning until Thursday night. And was pretty tired on Friday. But we made it through.
Hey, you know what? We've survived both the Thanksgiving holiday and the TCU football regular season. I think that deserves a pat on the back.
It does deserve a pat on the back. And you know who else deserves a pat on the back, Melissa? Our podcast sponsor, the Flying T Club. Big thanks to the Flying T Club. They are TCU's NIL collective. They are a 501c3 nonprofit, which means, folks, if you haven't given yet, now that it's December, It's the perfect time to make that end of year donation, that end of year contribution, get a little tax write-off right at the end of the year. And the greatest thing about it is that not only are you supporting over 130 TCU student athletes if you're giving to the Flying T Club, but you're also supporting all of the nonprofit charities that they partner with in and around the city of Fort Worth. They connect these student athletes with the charities that they work with to do a lot of good in the community. It's a really cool setup, and your money goes a tremendously long way to allowing the Flying T Club to continue doing that work. If you want to take a look at how you can get involved, just go to flyingtclub.com, make your tax-deductible year-end gift, either an individual contribution, one-time gift. You can make a recurring gift happen. You can enter a corporate partnership if you're a business owner and you want to find ways to contribute a little bit more. You see all of the work that they do with local charities. You see profiles on the student athletes and the coaches. The Flying T Club really does it all, and it's a really, really cool organization. We're lucky to partner with them. And then don't forget that if you do make a contribution to the Flying T Club, you also get Horned Frog priority points. So tax write-off, priority points, good being done in the community where you live. I can't think of a better winning scenario than partnering up with the Flying T Club. So go to flyingtclub.com, make your contribution today, and see how much you can contribute to the TCU success.
It sounds like a winning combination.
It sure is a winning combination. Another winning combination is our partnership with Dave Campbell's Texas Football as a part of the Republic of Football Network. If you want to be the most informed Texas football sports person in your circles, all you've got to do is subscribe to the Republic of Football Network. That's a podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts, and it's got our show along with a show for every D1 football program in the state of Texas, which means you could be up to date on the Rice coaching search, which they just made a hire last week. Now you can see what Sam Houston State's going to do with their new coaching vacancy because their coach just left for Temple. You want to be involved in that? You can go over to Gambling Gaucho, see how they feel about Micah Hudson, the 5-star wide receiver, transferring out.
Rough
how they
day.
feel about firing their defensive coordinator, Tim DeRuyter. You can hear how the Baylor folks feel about keeping Dave Aranda for another year and wondering if they're going to hold on to Jake Spavital as their offensive coordinator or if he might be headed to greener pastures somewhere else. So you can be the most informed Texas football fan if you listen to the Republic of Football Network. If all of that sounds like too much, though, just hit up the Frogs Insider stream. Wherever you get your podcasts, just search Frogs Insider. You'll get a feed with just our shows, lots of interviews, all the good stuff right there in your ears for your listening pleasure. And you can go over to the YouTube channel where we've got a ton of content. We've got all of the press conferences, player interviews, this podcast in video form where you can see the glory of the mustache, which still lives for a little bit longer. Yeah. You can go and watch the live stream where Melissa ate the saltiest chip on the planet and quite nearly died. Didn't die, thankfully, but quite nearly did. And then you can see the latest little thing that we put up this morning. Sunday is the day that we are recording this, and on Sunday morning I posted the first episode of a little series I'm doing called Horned Frog Flashback. A little look at the Immaculate Deflection. So kind of fun little piece up there as well on the YouTube channel. So get over there and subscribe to that.
It is more, I have to say, I'm going to take a minute here and brag on you a little bit. It is more than just a fun little piece. It is very cool, very well executed. I know you put a ton of time and effort into it. It shows in the final product, and it's a blast. It's a blast to relive that moment. I can't wait for the next several episodes. I know you've got some really exciting stuff coming down the pipe. But you sent us a little pre-Thanksgiving preview, or maybe it was on Thanksgiving. I don't remember what it was, but you let us watch it before the official release, and it was great. It was just really well done. It's a lot of fun, and I think that TCU fans and college football fans in general should all take 14 and a half minutes out of their day and watch it.
That's all it takes, 14 and a half minutes. But I do appreciate the kind words. I don't accept compliments well, so just,
I know.
Yeah, but you know that. It's been a decade that we've been doing this. But it was very fun to make. And so if I enjoyed making it, I hope that people enjoy watching it. And the next one is Matt Curry's Grand Slam in the College World Series. So that'll be coming sometime in January. Very excited about that.
It's going to be awesome.
Yes. Melissa, let's get into it. TCU 20, Cincinnati 13. The Frogs finish winning 5 of their last 6 games of the year, 8-4 on the regular season, 6-3 in Big 12 play, 6th overall in conference. What's your takeaway from this football game?
It was a football game.
Was.
It was. I think that it's going to be hard to effectively judge this game because of the elements. TCU is obviously not built to be successful in that kind of weather. That's not. It requires you to be good at things that TCU just really hasn't needed to be good at this year, or hasn't
Running
been
the football
able.
and run defense, yeah.
Yeah, those things. I thought the first half was pretty good, although they did leave some opportunities on the board. We were chatting about it, and Hoover was a little inaccurate early. He missed a couple of throws, but he made a couple of nice throws quickly thereafter. I think that Jack Besh and Savion Williams getting banged up certainly changed the scope of the game. I thought that they did a good job in the second half of just kind of hanging on for dear life because that's about what they were down to. With Savion kind of in and out of the game, and not. I'm assuming that they were protecting him at this point. And not wanting to overly risk him. And then obviously with Jack Besh, we got good injury news that I'm sure we'll talk about here in a minute but it certainly changed kind of the scope of what they wanted to do and how they were able to do it. But I will give credit. I think if not for that muff punt recovery on that first, after TCU's first series, this game could have looked a lot differently. But that defense did make plays when they needed to, even as Brendan Sorsby got rolling a little bit late, especially with the ground game. And I'll also give credit. I tweeted this, and it remains true. I'm very concerned that the Frogs can't just line up and run the ball. But once again, I will give credit to the offensive staff who, without maybe the ability to run Savion like they would have planned to, using Haas Haney in those similar packages. I think they could have gotten more creative, but probably hadn't prepped to use, maybe not to use him in those situations, those pressure situations like they ended up having to do. So they won a game. It's really hard to win football games. It's really hard to win football games on the road. It's really hard to win football games in those conditions when you've never really played in them. And they went out and they won. It wasn't pretty, but they got to 8 wins. They positioned themselves for potentially a better bowl, and they finished the regular season on a high note. So that's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Savion with 2 more rushing touchdowns. He finishes with 6 on the year. He also had 6 receiving touchdowns. So kind of a fun little balance there. 13 if you count the passing touchdown that he had to Jack Besh against Baylor as well. Really good season from him. He was, like a little banged up, shoulder, hip, something on that left side seemed to be bothering him, so he wasn't in a ton in the fourth quarter. Lemmerman, solid on the first 2 field goals as conditions kind of worsened there near the end of the half. He doinked a 38-yarder that really, truly, with the way the second half went, would have made it a stress-free second half, I think, for TCU if he connects on that field goal, because they would have been up, I believe it's 23-7 at that point. It would have been the halftime score. And so 2 or 3 on field goals, a shaky freshman year for Kyle Lemmerman, truly. But you can see when he's connecting, when he looks like he's in a rhythm, when he's hitting good field goals, like you can see the talent, you can see the vision there with Kyle Lemmerman. And obviously he was one of the highest rated kickers coming out of high school. So I wonder if an off season in the weight room and just an opportunity, now that he's had some of these looks both at TCU and on the road, if he doesn't settle down a little bit and become quite a good kicker for this team. TCU didn't score in the second half, and they managed to win a football game. Really interesting stat there. The only other time they got close to that was Utah, when they kicked a field goal early in the third quarter and then kind of held on for a 13-7 win against the Utes. I think a testament to the defense, really, truly, when the offense just didn't have it in the weather conditions there or against a really stout Utah defense. TCU's defense kind of stepped up, and it was nice to see. They did give up 200 rushing yards on the ground, 213 to be exact, 110 to the running back and 93 to Sorsby, the quarterback. But they got turnovers when they needed to. Channing Canada made a great read on a pass in the end zone to shut down a 15-play drive for Cincinnati with an interception in the end zone. They forced quite a few fumbles. They didn't fall on all of them, but they forced a few fumbles, and then kind of just held on at the end there. A terrible, terrible Hail Mary attempt from Sorsby.
It's the worst
at the
I've
end
ever
of the game.
seen.
That Bud Clark still tried to pick off, even though he was like 3 yards out of the back of the end zone. Anyways, I agree. I think it was a shaky game. I think the weather had a lot to do with it. Hoover obviously didn't have his best night. and you still managed to win. So I think that was good. You did already kind of allude to it. Jack Besh does not play after the first quarter in this one. He had 3 catches for 27 yards before he left with a knee injury. We were told during the game that the concern was that it was a pretty serious knee injury, but now we've got MRI results to go off of. It is an MCL injury, not a tear. 4 to 6 weeks of recovery time. He should be good to go for the NFL Combine, maybe Senior Bowl, maybe even TCU's Pro Day, right? Like all of the things that he will need to participate in to improve his draft stock even further. It looks like Jack Besh will be able to participate in, and he tweeted out earlier today, "The Lord is great always, and his timing is always perfect." A nice little shout out from Jack Besh to a guy who's talked about his faith a lot this year.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't seem like just a platitude when he tweets something like that out. But yes, should be good to go. And just so we clear this out of the way, no, he does not have any eligibility left. He does not. He does not. He came in as a true freshman at LSU in 2021, which means he does not have the benefit of a redshirt year or a COVID year. He is done. Fully done. So there's that. Haas Haney. Interesting. I think I agree with you, Melissa, that he was in the fourth quarter because of a banged-up Savion Williams. But it's interesting that there's this, because all year we've heard, since they've gone to this Wildcat package with Savion, we've heard, well, he's big, right? He's 6'5", he's 220 pounds, he's hard to tackle, he runs hard, you know. It's all of these reasons about Savion's size and speed combination that make him effective in this run game package. But then the backup to that plan is a short, rather light freshman quarterback who had, 8 carries, 48 yards. He had a 21-yard run. He had an 8-yard run for a first down. That was really crucial. He had runs of 6 and 7 yards, right? He averaged, I think, 6 yards a carry exactly. If that math works out.
Protected the football.
He didn't fumble, which was huge in those conditions. It's just so interesting to me that limited time quarterback runs, Savion Williams runs, have been so much more effective than running back runs. Now, we did see a direct snap to Trent Battle in this game.
And Cam Cook.
And we saw one to Cam Cook. There's something to be said for bringing that extra blocker into play. That's not lost on me. But it's just so interesting that when, and maybe it's a mental thing for the offensive line, hey, we know that a quarterback's not getting this football, or hey, we know that there's no possibility of a throw happening here. We got to grind it out, and we got to be on our A game in this run block. That just isn't translating when it's a traditional run. That I'm having a hard time drawing a line between, if that makes sense.
But I think the opposite could also be true as well, and that the defense is having to prepare for something differently. And we did see Savion throw the ball 2 or 3 times this season out of that package.
Sure, yeah.
And so I think that, when you think about what TCU wants to do offensively, you go back to the Bryles offense at Baylor when they were really humming, and having 4 receivers, going empty set a lot, spreading the defense out, creating space so that it wasn't necessarily the line having to block to create running lanes as much as it was spreading the defenders out so that there were more natural lines available. And Baylor had some really good offensive lines in that time as well, which is a big part of their success for sure. But you make the defense have to make difficult decisions. And with Savion, who was a high school quarterback, and so even though you don't think he's going to throw the ball, you have to respect that he might. Haas Haney obviously is a high school quarterback. And I think Cincinnati had no thought that Haney was going to throw the ball. And I would have loved to have seen him just once drop back and look like he was going to pass and maybe do some RPO type things. I don't blame TC for not doing that, but it would have been cool to put something fun on film ahead of bowl season, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the defense it makes them think about one extra thing, and then they have to react to one extra thing. And so, I think that there's a reason running quarterbacks are successful, because there's an element of surprise or concern that isn't there when you don't have the threat of a running quarterback. And so I think anything you can do to make the defense have to have a second thought makes your offense that much more successful. And the offense already has an advantage because they know what they're going to do theoretically. So I think that there's a little bit of both for sure. I think you're right, and that the offensive line is just going run the ball, but they also know that that's what's going to happen anytime that they're handing it off to Cam Cook or Trent Battle or whoever else in the backfield too. So I think the extra blocker is a part of it. I think that the little bit of an element of something different and new is a part of it. And I think the element of the defense having to make a thought and line up a little bit differently is a part of it too. All of those things being said, it's still very concerning that your really only effective running back is a wide receiver that's going to be leaving your team. So if you were to tell me that Haas Haney's going to fill that role next year and that they're going to have more throwing options out of it, I'm very intrigued. I'm very interested. I don't think it's a long-term solution for success. And you put the schedule here that we'll get to later, but especially when you look at who TCU has to face going forward. So celebrate it for now because the offensive coaches did a good job of figuring out a way to make this work. But I don't think that you can rely on this being your run game for the future.
I agree. And I think there will be some things that we see happen this offseason to address that. Namely, along the offensive line, we're going to see TCU probably get into the portal after a tackle. Because the reality is that Bless Harris struggled way too much at times for what they needed from him. And at that left tackle spot, maybe not the most integral spot for run blocking necessarily, but a pretty important one just generally. And when you're ceding time to a true freshman in Ryan Hughes over the last quarter of the season, there's a struggle there. They also, and this isn't really an excuse, although depth does have its limits down at the bottom, I wonder what this offensive line would have looked like if Cade Bennett had been healthy.
Yeah.
In the interior there, if you had been able to have him as your right or left guard, whichever, and then have Deary, who, again, I thought Colton Deary had a really good back half of the season. I thought James Brockermeyer had a really good back half of the season. Those guys were the kind of hate-and-ass linemen that TCU has really thrived with over the last couple of decades. And so I appreciated seeing that from them. But the tackle spots, right guard, I think we're going to see TCU make some strides in those areas. And I think that we also had the benefit of watching two young running backs grow up. Really Cam Cook, I thought, had a much better back half of the year than early on. Jeremy Payne looked like a great runner whenever he had opportunities, which were relatively few and far between. But I think that the running back room is in good shape. I think with some modifications along the offensive line that we'll see this offseason, I think there's reason to be hopeful that the running game will take a step forward in year 3 of Kendall Briles' offense. One thing that is abundantly clear is that he did things and Sonny Dykes did things to make this a more efficient red zone team. And I think that was a really big takeaway for me as we kind of transition from the Cincinnati game into this season in review session here, Melissa. They were 124th in red zone efficiency at the end of the 2023 season. They are terrible. You can't cut it in a way that's good. Cannot cut it in a way that's good. They are 23rd at the end of this year. 100 spot improvement year over year. Wow. Now, obviously, we can talk about level of competition. We can talk about the teams that they played, which we're going to get into here in a second. We can talk about all the other things. But the reality is that you don't jump 100 spots just because of who you're playing. You jump 100 spots because you made some pretty significant alterations to what you wanted to do in the red zone and how you approached your red zone offense. Savion Williams had a lot to do with that. But also an improved Josh Hoover had a lot to do with that. Protecting the ball in the red zone was a huge priority for TCU this year. They didn't do it well in the first half of the season. They did it incredibly well in the second half of the season. Missed some field goals, still had some flubs in the red zone, but overall it was a much better red zone offense in 2024. And that's something that I think TCU can continue to build on. It's like, okay, We saw them in 2023. The offense have a significant glaring hole. We saw the coaching staff address that glaring hole and improve at it. And so if I'm using very basic equations here, we see a glaring hole in 2024 with the run game. I think that if they attack it and they approach it just like they did the red zone offense, we can see a pretty dramatically improved run game in 2025.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
I think you're right. And I think when you look at that offensive line as being a key to being more successful, and you look at, like you said, they've got to go get a tackle, but everybody else has eligibility left. We saw Ryan Hughes come on and play well. Like he was not noticeable, and that's like the biggest compliment you can give to an offensive lineman, right?
Yeah.
You hopefully you get Cade Bennett back. And I think you have really high hopes for what he can be adding to that group. So, yeah, I mean, you should see you're not going to see a 100 spot jump, that'd be impossible. But if you see a rate of success that is similar to this year, you cut down some of the turnovers both in and outside of the red zone. Josh continues to develop and mature, and he has cut down the turnovers so much over the second half of the season and still thrown two of the most ridiculous interceptions I think I've ever seen.
Yes.
And those are the things you just like that a veteran quarterback just won't do, you hope, right? If he's going to be a quarterback that can take TCU to a conference championship game, which in this version of the Big 12 should be the expectation.
Yes.
At least, like, I think we said this going in, is that you want it to be November and TCU to still be in the mix. Like, that should be the bar. And they were technically still in the mix. They were technically still in the mix.
Until the last weekend.
So, I mean, but that should be the lowest bar for this program. When you look, I mean, the team that was picked to finish last is going to was the first team to clinch a spot in the championship game. Like that to me, like, should not be happening with TCU in this conference. I'm not saying they're entitled to win conference championships every year by any stretch of the imagination, but man, like, and I guess that's kind of where I sit on this. And there's a lot of what ifs and what might have been, and you can look at how well they played in the second half and only winning one game. But at the end of the day, like, if you told me at the beginning of the season, you mentioned this, we both kind of said 8-4, 7-5, 8-4 seems right. And you tell me at the end of the season, knowing what we know, now it feels like this should have been a 9 or 10 win season based on the games that they lost, the way that they lost, and who that they played. But it's I think that 8-4 is only acceptable because of how bad 2023 was, and it would have been hard to go from 5-7 to 10-2 or 11-1. And I think, like, listen, I'll say SMU kicked our ass and deserved to win. Baylor beat TCU, right?
Well,
and a very winnable game. Yeah,
Dominated
very winnable game. But Baylor beat TCU. I can live with those. Are the two losses where I'm like, SMU was much better than TCU this year. I gotta hold on. I gotta throw up my mouth a little bit. And Baylor beat us in Waco. Okay, but I'm not gonna, like, it's just so hard to look past UCF and Houston and think of how many times we heard Sonny Dykes say this team just wasn't excited to play. And those are still the lingering things from, like, you got to fix that, man. Like, I can take getting beat when the team looked ready to play. I hate going into a game and your team is not the more prepared team. Your team's not the more excited team. Your team's not the team that is going to play the hardest. And that's still happening far too often for what I feel like a TCU program should be acceptable to a TCU program.
I will. First of all, I agree. I think there's no reason to be this concept of being the more excited team to play is not a hard one, right? You should be excited to go out there and A, play a game you love, B, this is the rare opportunity that these kids have to get looked at for a potential future in this sport. And regardless of what the percentage chance is of you getting that opportunity, go out there and act like you're the one person on the field that is going to earn it, right?
Yeah.
Work hard, try hard. That shouldn't be a major hurdle, is what I'm trying to say. I will also say I didn't see TCU's energy looked much better after the first bye week, every single week, than it did prior to the bye week.
Agree.
So I think that they did find some sort of solution there. I think that a lot of that was player-led. We saw a lot of clips of Johnny Hodges, of Nana Osafo-Mensah, of Josh Hoover giving really inspiring speeches to their teammates. One of those guys is coming back next year. Maybe two of those guys are coming back next year. And it's not Nana Osafo-Mensah, the man with like 90 degrees at this point. So smart.
Do we have to call him Dr. Hodges at the press conferences?
I'm going to start calling him Van Wilder. He keeps bleaching his hair like that. But
you probably just aged out half our podcast audience, FYI. But
I don't think so. Have you seen our demos on YouTube? I don't think so. I think there are a lot of Van Wilder folks in this. Listen, if you're listening to this show right now, whether it's you can make comments on Spotify podcasts now. If you're listening on Spotify or if you're listening on the YouTube channel, get in the comments and just type in Van Wilder. That's all you have to say.
Type in Van Wilder and ask when Maddie Shear's coming back. Those two
God,
things.
Do not ask me when Maddie Shear. If one more person on the board asks me when Maddie Shear's coming back.
Or Colin texts you.
I'm deleting the whole. Yeah, Colin, please stop texting me about Maddie Shear.
We will tell you when Maddie Shear is coming back.
You'll be the first person.
Or she will just be playing, and that's how we'll all know. It'll be fine.
First of all, but we're gonna get ahead of ourselves here. Did you enjoy as much as I did watching her on the end of TCU's bench in the Cayman Islands Classic? Because
looks like she's ready to come back. I will say that. Was moving very well.
Like I've said on the board, every time someone has asked, rehab is progressing.
Yeah.
No, she's not going to redshirt.
She was losing her damn mind every time.
Anyways,
TCU scored. It was great.
Let's fully set up this next section here because we are talking a little bit season in review now. To put a pin in the TCU Cincinnati game, I wanted to go back to TCU's oh my gosh. Road schedule and just read out the games that they played on the road and then the result. At Stanford, win. At SMU, loss. At Kansas, win. At Utah, win. At Baylor, loss. At Cincinnati, win. That's 4-2 on the road.
That's great.
That's not a bad road season. Now, as we get into this season review, I think you and I kind of feel similarly about things, so I'm going to try and articulate a little bit, and then you can go. So we're not sounding too redundant here, but TCU gets to 8-4, 6-3. I believe, like you said, we both said right around there. I'm pretty sure I said 8-4 exactly was what would be a successful season in 2024 for TCU. I said that would be the floor of a successful season. I think I said anything less than that would be relatively disappointing. Going into the season, and this is what I've been trying to kind of parse out about how I'm feeling, because it's like, yeah, they got 8-4. But why am I thinking of that but? The schedule was so much weaker than we anticipated it being. Arizona, Utah, and Oklahoma State were three teams that everybody was mentioning as being either Big 12 championship contenders or top third of the conference level caliber teams. Those are the three bottom of the standings teams in the Big 12 this year. They were the three worst teams. Like there's no other. They were the worst. One of them, Oklahoma State, did not win a conference game. That fall, by the way, will be studied.
Yeah.
Mike Gundy's fall will be studied. Let me tell you.
The fact that he's still employed today is crazy.
Yes, and that's a whole nother podcast. That's an off-season podcast. All but two of TCU's Big 12 opponents finished in the bottom half of the conference. If you go and you look at the Big 12 standings, here, I'll pull them up. If you go and you look at the Big 12 standings, here are the bottom 6 teams in the conference this year. Bottom 7 teams in the conference this year. Kansas, Houston, Cincinnati, Utah, Arizona, UCF, Oklahoma State. The only two teams that TCU played that were not in the bottom 7 of the standings were Baylor and Texas Tech. They went 1-1 in those games. Those are the only two of conference teams that they played that finished the season with a winning record, of which TCU only played 3 teams all year with a winning record. Baylor, Tech, and SMU. They were 1-2 in those games. They didn't play a ranked team all season long. At the time of the game being played, they didn't. None of their opponents were ranked. which is crazy considering that like 5 were ranked preseason.
Yeah.
So my takeaway is kind of split. I'm not going to backtrack and say that 8-4 is not a successful season just because ultimately TCU doesn't control how good or bad other teams are. You just get your schedule handed to you, and those are the games that you play. And coming off of a 5-7 year, I think that, getting out there and taking care of business, especially the back half of the season like they did, going 5-1 in the last 6, I think that that's objectively good, especially when you consider the fact that they started 3-3. The fact that they were able to hit that bye week after a loss to Houston and manage to course correct and get better, I think that's a positive takeaway from this year. I think it's another signal of several signals that we've already talked about that this coaching staff does have an understanding of how to make changes that impact results in a positive way. Can we get them to put it all together? That would be really nice. But they beat the teams in front of them like they should have, except for Baylor, which you still had that opportunity. Yeah. A field goal loss.
Very well at the time. Baylor's
been
good.
a top 5. Baylor's been a top 5 offense in the country over the last 7 weeks by almost every statistical measure.
They figured it out.
Going down to Waco and losing by a field goal is not something to be ashamed of this year. Anyways, I think that regardless of schedule strength, regardless of what the expectations were, how we feel about them being met or unmet, I think that TCU showed growth in year 3 under Sonny Dykes. Was it enough growth? We can debate. Was it growth in the right areas? We can debate. But I don't think we can debate the fact that TCU showed, A, an ability to course correct, and B, an ability to take care of business when they needed to take care of business, and then C, a growth in the right direction, just generally.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think when you look at this in the larger context of the entirety of Sonny Dykes' time at TCU, and obviously 2022 is an aberration to some degree. A year ago, they lost the locker room after a difficult start. This year, they galvanized the locker room after a difficult start. And that shows good leadership, both in your coaching staff and among your players. But I think that it's going to be hard to fully evaluate the success of this year for another 12 months. Because I think when we do this show a year from now and we look at what happens in 2025, that will tell us if what they did this year was build a foundation or did they just start a pattern of treading water. Right, because that's my thing is I don't want to look at this and the way the schedule played out and look at it from a 30,000-foot view and say this is acceptable and this is the expectation. Because, again, in hindsight, the opportunity was so there. But coming in, we both, that 7-5, 8-4, Vegas had TCU at 7.5, right? They are exactly where they were supposed to be. And that's fine. I'm not mad about 8 wins. I'm not mad about getting to play in probably a decent bowl game against a good opponent. These are all positive things that you needed to do to establish yourself. But it's really hard for me to not see the full picture of the state of college football and think of TCU cannot be an 8-5 program regularly. That needs to be the aberration in the Big 12, not the expectation. Mm-hmm. And so I want to see, what do they do with the loss of 31 seniors? How do they address those needs? What are these young guys that they've been building for the last 2 years and this potential, top 30 recruiting class that they're going to sign here on Wednesday? Are those the type of guys that can be difference makers for this program? Are they both developing young players and high school players and also filling the gaps correctly through the portal? Can they go out and get that potential left tackle that they need to make this an effective running unit? Can they sell a good product of TCU without having just without being able to go out and buy players the way that other schools are going to be able to do and find the right types of people that are both as human beings and as players to make this a team that can contend to win a Big 12 championship next year. Because the other part of this is, some of these teams are losing really important guys. Some of these teams found something really successful this season. A lot of these contenders, Arizona State has a freshman quarterback. They're going to lose their all-world running back, but
Dallas Cowboys running back
Cam Scatterbo in a backfield with
Ashton Jeanty and Taj Brooks.
And maybe also Devin Neal.
F quarterbacks.
Right? Yeah.
F quarterbacks. We're going all building it all out of running backs.
So, I mean, it's the Big 12 is not a super league. There's not a superpower. We'll see what's going to happen with Colorado. They're certainly going to be an intriguing team to watch this offseason. Oklahoma State, obviously an intriguing team to watch, but Kenny Dillingham has found something at Arizona State, and I think that they can continue to be a problem. I'm interested to see who West Virginia hires. If they get Kolnecki from Penn State, all of a sudden I'm terrified of that sleeping giant. I mean, there are a lot of Houston seems to be on the up and up. Will Spav stay in Waco? I don't know, but if he does, Baylor is going to be a great team next year. You cannot lose the Battle of Texas and expect to win the war on college football. Mm-hmm. And that's what I as a TCU fan and person who covers TCU, I'm never not going to be able to think about what does this mean within the scope of everything happening around the sport. And TCU has to be better if they want to avoid being on the outside looking in for all eternity. And I think that everybody around their favorite team is kind of thinking that direction. I mean, we mentioned Stanford. We saw what they did hiring Andrew Luck to be their GM of football. Like, people are taking big swings because that's what you have to do if you aren't an elite power or in an elite power conference. And so what is TCU going to do next to build on 8-5 and take that big swing to make sure that they can be a championship contender going forward?
I think that's a great question. I think that's a great concern. I will say this. There are two 10-win teams in the state this year, Texas and SMU. Then there are 4 8-win teams.
Yeah.
TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, and Texas A&M. And those mean different things based on the conference that you're in, right? A&M was still playing for a conference title berth as of Saturday night. So was Baylor, so was Texas Tech, right? Like, none of these teams were out of it until the very end. And I think that when you start to look at where things are shifting and what could be next and how you get there if you're not already in it, I think an 8-4 season like this one, while it could have been 9-3 or 10-2, I think it's really good that it wasn't 6-6.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's really good that it wasn't another 5-7 year. You figured your shit out halfway through the year, and you managed to scrape together an 8-win season when you clearly didn't have it in the run game, when you clearly didn't have it in run defense for most of the year, and that cropped up again on Saturday against Cincinnati. I think it was really, really good for Sonny Dykes to scrape whatever he had to scrape together to get to 8. Now, yes, we wanted 9 or 10 or 11. Of course, we'll always want 9, 10, or 11, and we'll always look back on the season and look at missed opportunities. That's the nature of fan bases. That's the nature of analysts, is to look for not only the good, but the what could have been, right? But I also think that 8-4 in this context, in this moment, finishing 6th when you were projected 10th, all of that is good. And anybody who's saying that it's not good, I don't know what to tell you. Because, and I don't think that's what you're saying, Melissa, just to be completely clear. But I think that there are folks out there who are going to be like, oh, well, he failed this year because X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. And I don't think that that's a fair assessment of the season by any stretch. I do think there are things he should be rightfully criticized for. I think his staff should be rightfully criticized for. But I don't think that looking at an 8-4 season and saying that that's a failure is the way to go about doing that.
Yeah.
Now, next year, going into 2025, the road, at least on paper, looks harder than it did in 2024. So you've got a home schedule that includes potentially college football playoff-bound SMU, not potentially, but somewhat rebuilding Colorado at home. You get Baylor at home. You get Iowa State at home. You get Cincinnati looking for a get-back at home. Then you go on the road, and you'll be facing a first-year head coach at North Carolina. You'll be facing Arizona State, BYU, a Houston that beat you this year, Kansas State, and a first-year head coach at West Virginia, potentially Andy Kotelnicki. And that looks like a much, much bigger mountain to climb than 2024 does. And that's why I think, hey, 8-4 is good. We've got it. We've got to figure out what the next step is this offseason.
Eight and four next year. Yeah, 8-4 next year might feel really, really good if those teams are what we think they're supposed to be. That's why 8-4 this year feels just kind of okay because of who those teams ended up being, right? The gift of hindsight. No, but you're absolutely right. Progress is important in college football, and I think not just from the big picture. And I'm always I'm an anxiety riddled woman in her 40s with ADHD and OCD, and so of course I'm always thinking about what could possibly go wrong in the future, and that's why I'm always it's hard just to be happy in the present, right? But I think that I think the points that you made about figuring things out, coming together, keeping the locker room together, do point to a positive sign for the future. You lose some great leadership on this team. Potentially Johnny Hodges, guys like Bud Clark and Nnamdi Obiezar and Abe Kamara. I mean, there are a lot of guys who have played important roles both on and off the field for this squad that won't be around a season from now. And then you look at the places you're going to have to go to play, that even if those teams aren't really good, playing at BYU, incredibly difficult, playing at Kansas State and West Virginia, incredibly difficult, have long been bugaboos for TCU. Yeah. So in Arizona State, again, like we said, they're going to lose arguably the conference offensive player of the year potential. Well, I mean, it's going to be a 3-way run for that one. But they lose a really great player, but you can tell that there's some magic down there with Kenny Dillingham and his crew. So it's going to be fascinating to see, but you're right. Winning games in college football is really hard. And at the end of the day, TCU won more than they lost, and they won 5 of their last 6. That's something to be excited about. Bowl game results don't really matter anymore because of the portal and opt-outs and all these other things. But if you can go out and get some young guys some run and have some fun playing against a good opponent and put on a good show in the bowl game, then you can be excited about what's coming next.
And, I think while bowl games matter far less than they did if they're not a playoff game, being able to see you were 9-4 is still pretty nice. Yeah,
I would like that 9th win, especially if we get an SEC opponent.
LSU in the Texas Bowl.
Yeah,
not out of the question.
Without potentially I didn't see the update on Nuss's injury, but I saw he left the game on Saturday.
He came back in.
He did. Okay.
He got some of the good stuff.
Okay.
To get back in there. That man looked like he broke multiple ribs, but whatever they got on the sideline at LSU, give it to me.
Yeah. I don't know if I want that. Yeah. No.
Horse tranquilizer, come on, bring it.
Sure, why not?
But all of this offseason stuff, all of this progress towards next year really does start this week, Melissa, because we've got early signing period on Wednesday, December 4th. TCU's
so early.
Signing.
What the heck? I didn't even realize.
First Wednesday in December. Wednesday in
There
December.
we go.
We're getting after it. They moved it up a little bit so that it didn't fully interfere with bowl prep and everything like it has the last few years. But TCU right now is the number 22 class in the country, which is the number 1 class in the Big 12, coming in for the 2025 class. A lot of these guys are going to be early enrollees. I'm not going to sit here because we're already almost 50 minutes into this show and break it all down. But, Melissa, we do have someone coming on the midweek episode to help break it all down.
We got a big deal. We got a big poll, Jamie.
Our good buddy, Jeremy Clark from HornFrogList.com, 24/7 Sports, who I've been honored to work with for the last year and a half over there, will be coming on to the show, and he and I are going to do a little bit of a signing day special, breaking down all of the commits in this class for TCU, starting with the top, Terry Shelton, all the way on down. I love Terry Shelton for 2 reasons, by the way. This is my one anecdote on the recruiting class. He is the most enthusiastic TCU commit, I think, in this class. He's tweeting about TCU every single day.
Amazing.
He's been baiting other people with his commitments. He tweeted out a Florida State offer, and then a couple hours later said, tweet coming soon. And then the next tweet was, I'm fully committed to TCU. I'm shutting down my recruitment. I will be signing with the Horned Frogs on Wednesday. He messaged me and was like, hey man, my signing thing's at 3:30. Can you come out? I would love for you to come out. Jeremy's going to be there for it. And then all of a sudden, every time I hear the name Terry, and I told Jeff this on his podcast a couple weeks ago, Jeff Wilson, I think of the Back It Up Terry fireworks video.
Oh gosh, yep.
From back in the day.
Yep.
And I cannot wait to try and convince Brian Estridge to use back it up Terry the first time he scores a touchdown in a TCU uniform. I think that's going to be kind of fun.
It'd be good. Sounds like he's a true wide receiver. He's got a wide receiver mentality, and we're going to need some of that attitude. It's Savion coming out in the dark sunglasses. I love it. I'm here for it.
I'm absolutely here for a Terry Shelton, Jakyle Baker, Jordan Bailey, Eric McAllister renaissance next year at wide receiver.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
It'd be a fun
But yes,
group.
we're going to have Jeremy on the show talking about signing day on the midweek episode, so that'll drop on Thursday this week. Melissa, as we shift into the next thing, do you want to talk about your guest, or do you want to wait?
Yes. Well, I'm very excited to bring on a really cool guest as well. Until we actually record, when it's a big national person, I usually don't like to drop the name just in case something happens because these people's schedule.
Fair.
But I will say, plan to record Monday night with a pretty big name in women's college basketball, who's been covering the sport for a while. People will be very, I think, familiar with her. So I'm excited about that, and might also maybe have a second special guest that we're working on that I will be super excited about. We'll see if the people are. I think they will
How
be.
are you going to comport yourself if that interview comes to fruition?
Horse tranquilizers, I think.
See?
Yeah.
LSU, hit us up.
Yeah, hit us
We
up.
both need
Yeah.
your help.
It is, it's kind of using that as our segue. One of my favorite things in 2022, covering TCU football, was that as TCU kind of made their run to the playoffs, we could get anybody we wanted to come on the show. People were lining up to talk to us.
We had Golick on our
Multiple
pregame
times.
show.
Yeah, multiple times talk to Golick. Like,
Love
you
you,
could
Mike.
pretty
Love
much,
you-
yeah,
love you, Junior,
love
by
you,
the way.
Junior. Yeah, Gojo's the best. But we could get anybody to talk to us, and we are experiencing that a little bit again because TCU women's basketball, by the time people start listening to the show, may well be a top 10 team.
Yes.
Tea leaves are trending that direction, and so I have just brazenly reached out to national women's basketball, which again, I understand people are gonna be like, well, it's women's basketball, but national people who want to talk about TCU and want to talk about TCU women's basketball with us. And a lot of that is because of what happened in the Cayman Islands last week over the Thanksgiving holiday, starting with absolutely breaking Notre Dame, who went on to lose to Utah the next day, which was almost a little bit disappointing, but with one of the most stunning comebacks I have seen out of a TCU program. I mean, this was almost Alamo Bowl level.
You're not wrong. I mean, they were down 14 with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. 2 minutes and 51 seconds left in the third quarter. They were down 14 points. And at that point, Hailey Van Lith scored a bucket to make it 12. And that started a run over the next 13 minutes where Hailey herself scored 16 points. And TCU as a team outscored Notre Dame by 22.
Yeah.
They won the fourth quarter they won the fourth quarter 31-12. They just decided, "Hey, all right, Notre Dame, you've had your fun, and now we're going to kick your ass." Like, that was essentially the mindset it felt like TCU shifted into in the last 13 minutes of that game, was just, "All right, we're done here. And now we're going to put you to bed."
And you talk about a coach having the pulse of his team. Mark Campbell just continues to have a ton of talent, which helps.
Yes.
But also to understand how to push the right buttons. And I think Javi did the scout again on Notre Dame, correct?
He did.
And I think he is really, really good at identifying places to attack. And as that game went on, I think TCU did such a good job of, they got the Notre Dame big off the floor with foul trouble, which is a massive advantage when you have a 6'7" center who is as offensively gifted as Sedona Prince is.
Yes.
And and this is just, man, like, Hailey Van Lith does not need me to defend her. She does not. There's no need for me to defend. But I feel so obligated to, because every time we post something that this freaking badass does.
Yeah.
Oh, but remember when she got cooked by Clayton Clark? Oh, remember at LSU and she ran? No. F all that noise. People that are saying that, first of all, get out of your mama's basement. The holiday is over. Go find a job. Go do something productive with your life instead of attacking people that you're so clearly jealous of their gifts on the internet. It's stupid and it's wrong and you're dumb. But second of all, man, like, Hailey was bad in the first half of that game. She
2 points.
really struggled. 2
2
points.
points, 1 of 4 from the floor,
Couple
of
turnovers. Yeah.
Just
Defensively was just not locked in. She played not good basketball for 20 minutes. And then she came out, like you said, with a minute left in that third quarter, was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm Hailey Van Lith. And to have to be a player that has been through what she's been through, to play for Kim Mulkey, who, like, she won't say it, but who clearly, like, sucked the life out of her. Like what are those things that soul-sucking beasts called? Those like gremlin bees. I don't know. I remember it from a South Park episode. That's all I got.
Okay.
You know exactly what I'm talking about if you think about it.
I thought you were going to start talking about Dementors from Harry Potter.
Oh, well, also same
That's
thing.
where my head was going.
Kim Mulkey's a Dementor. Totally fair. Clip it. I don't care.
This is going to be the social clip for
Yep,
sure.
for sure. But to be like, to think back to that moment when the world kind of last watched her play, and it was that kind of moment on the big stage against a great player. Played poor. It got an IV at halftime. The poor woman was sick as a dog, but and to have that somewhere in your mind, and then to play for a coach that is able to keep you engaged and confident and believing yourself, so that you can come out and lead your team to that type of comeback. Because Sedona Prince was unbelievable. Hailey took over the last 13 minutes of that game.
Yes.
Like Hailey Van Lith, and she did it not just by scoring buckets, which she did a ton of, but by getting the ball and being a playmaker in a way that she was not a season ago. Agnes Eminopu hits the huge 3 to put TCU on top for the first time since the opening shot. Taylor Bigby had, I think, 9 points.
She's draining threes.
Every single one she hit was critically important. I just, Donovan Hunter had a tough weekend, and TCU was able to overcome that. Like, and then again, it's the talent and the will of this team, the coach pushing the right buttons, and to get that win in that high school gym, barely, and that kind of atmosphere that was pretty dead. Like those tournaments are a blast, I'm sure, for the players, but man, like the TV product is not it.
Yeah, Flow Sports, we got to do something about it.
Yeah.
We got to do something about
it. We got to do something.
Hailey Van Lith finishes with 21 points, 7 assists, and 3 rebounds in the 76-68 win over number 3 Notre Dame. Sedona Prince notches a 20-point, 20 rebound, 8 block,
unbelievable,
3 steal,
unbelievable,
double. It's the first 2020 game for a TCU women's player since Sandora Irvin, whose number is now retired, did so against South Florida in 2004. February of 2004, she had a 24-point, 21 rebound double. This is only the third 20 rebound game in TCU women's basketball history. So Sedona Prince just adding her name to other pages of the fact book for the rest of TCU's eternity with games that she's putting together so far this year. And then, they followed it up. By the way, speaking of South Florida, that was TCU's Saturday opponent, and TCU went out and brought the same energy and beat them by 41.
Yeah.
And Sedona had a 17-point, 13 rebound game, another double-double, earning her Cayman Island Challenge MVP. Hailey Van Lith led the team with 23 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds. I clipped her entire game, basically, and threw it up on the YouTube channel if people want to go watch highlights because you didn't have flow. I get it. I didn't think I had it anymore, but it turns out I hadn't canceled it from college baseball season.
Absolutely brutal, Jamie.
I turned it off today. I'll tell you that much. I'll renew back in February when I'm ready to watch college baseball tournaments all over the country again.
Maddie Connor, also we need to talk about her.
Yes, 18 points and 14 points, respectively.
No one is benefiting more from the damage that the Van Lith Prince pick and roll does than Madison Connor, who was lights out a season ago. But now
lights out is underselling it, Melissa.
Yeah.
She missed 5 games and still set the TCU single season made 3-point record.
She
made over 100 threes last year.
Yeah. And she might break her own record this year. She's only even had like one of those games. She had one obscene game. I think another one's coming. They haven't really needed it, but again, like she had a couple of big threes in that fourth quarter against Notre Dame after not having a hugely. I mean, I think I expect her to hit everything, and I get really confused when she misses. Then
she
was
had a
great.
couple misses where it's like, oh, that was 3/4 of the way down, and somehow didn't get
it. The poor guy doing radio, calling the game, like that man
Brutal.
thought every shot that TCU threw up was going in no matter what, and had you excited for them all. And when you weren't watching, it was just like, oh no, they missed again. Okay, but it just, man, like I'm gonna keep preaching this. Like, this team is good. They play at home Wednesday. You should go. Everyone should go. People should be there. And then most importantly, on Sunday, South Carolina, which is not the number one team in the country, but I imagine I need to find out from Brady if this is true, but we're setting up for potentially the first ever top 10 women's basketball matchup in TCU history.
I think that's right.
I don't think TCU has ever been ranked in the top 10 on the women's side. I don't think that's ever happened. I will confirm that, but I imagine this is going to be the first time in TCU women's basketball history that they have played a top 10 ranked matchup. South Carolina, if you guys saw what they did to Iowa State, who is very good.
South Carolina was pissed because they lost to UCLA and then decided that was not going to happen again, and then rage beat Iowa State by like 35 or something.
It was sad. It was rough. It was a tough scene. So they are back to playing like the champs. This is going to be a very, very good game. I'd imagine with Notre Dame losing to South Carolina's, probably could crawl back up to number 3. UCLA, UConn, still right there. It's probably the two best teams in the country. But this is going to be a really important test. And going into that Notre Dame game, I think I kind of was like, hey, especially after the first quarter, TCU can hang around. They can make this close. They can play within single digits. They'll have a chance to win. That'll be great. And then the fourth quarter happens, and I'm like, okay, this team's going undefeated. They're never losing a game. They're national championship or bust. My Sweet 16 prediction is probably too low. But again, like, South Carolina is an elite team with probably the most elite or second most elite coaching staff in the country, maybe behind Gino at UConn. I am so excited to see what Mark Campbell has in mixing and matching these rosters and how they prepare for this game. And I just want to see, again, just super competitive, give TCU a chance going into the fourth quarter. And let's see these women play their A game against one of the best 2 or 3 teams in the country, because we've seen them do it before now. And so it's just kind of my expectation. And it'll be at Dickey's. It'll be a cool environment. Hopefully it'll be a lot of purple people there.
Hopefully so. My 2 takeaways. First of all, they do have a game before the South Carolina game. They play Florida Atlantic Wednesday at 6:30. Important thing to mention, but it doesn't seem like TCU is really overlooking people at this point in time. And then we talked about it before the Notre Dame game. I think I mentioned how, Mark Campbell had kind of maybe inadvertently laddered the challenges here a little bit, with the first one being at home, NC State, the next one neutral site, Notre Dame, and then another neutral site, defending national champ. Well, we also saw progress from NC State to Notre Dame. TCU relied heavily on their defense over the last 5 or 6 minutes of that NC State game to kind of hang on and win. But we saw not only the defense extend from those last few minutes really to the whole second half, but we saw the offense gain so much confidence in those final 13 minutes. And really start to click on all cylinders. And that is what this basketball team can look like when they're clicking. And yes, Notre Dame's center was in foul trouble. She didn't get back in until the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game. But even then, the game was still not decided. I mean, TCU tied it at 61 with 5 minutes to go. And then from there, they still just kind of ran past them with those threes from Eminopu and Bigby and never looked back. So, I was impressed not only with the win, with the way that they won, but how they handled themselves down the stretch. I thought was much cleaner basketball, was much more efficient basketball. They didn't lack for defensive intensity, so that part of the game really still was at a high level. And now, like you said, hey, the best of the best is coming in. Can you get even cleaner? Right, because it wasn't the cleanest against NC State. It was a little bit cleaner against Notre Dame. Now you got to be clicking.
Yeah.
From the jump, Everything has to be clean. Don't have to play perfect basketball, but you have to play damn good basketball, the best basketball we've seen this team play, in order to go out and do what they expect to do probably against South Carolina, and that's win the basketball game.
Yeah.
Which is a crazy thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna, man, like Malaysia Fulali, I'm assuming he's gonna have Agnes and Manopu play a lot on. It's gonna be so freaking fun. I will say, and I think I tweeted this, I don't remember, but to me, the most impressive thing that Mark Campbell has done and his staff has done this season is win those big games and then come out and absolutely step on the neck of their next opponent.
Yeah.
Like I asked them after the NC State game, like, how do you not look ahead? How do you stay focused? And they were like, no issue. We're not worried about it. We're not worried about it.
Well,
and they've continued to do that.
You helped them come crashing back to earth after that NC State game because you reminded them that the next game was the field trip game.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I helped with that. I like to keep them humble. I love how cocky they are, but I'm here to ground them. That's what I'm here for. But yeah, someone's got to do it. Yeah. So FAU, I mean, what they did the first opening minutes of that game against a UCF team that was an intriguing team. Very most of their players were foreign. I think there was like 8 or 9 different countries represented on their roster, so they played a very like European style of basketball, which could be really tough to match up against. But they came out and I mean they did not let off. And he really played 5.5 players on Friday. Yeah. Like it was a starter heavy, and his starters came out and they played their tails off at the beginning of that game. I mean, there was no let up. And so I'd expect a great show against FAU Wednesday. And then I like the long break before South Carolina because they have put a lot of minutes, a lot of tread, taken off the tires of your elite players from that team. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And then like you're just a couple of weeks away because the women start playing conference games before Christmas. So they'll travel to Orlando.
December 21st.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's and then it's like the real fun starts. So I just cannot wait to see what this team can do in conference play.
It's looking like it's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
It's looking like it's going to be a good year. It already has been pretty fun to see this rise, and it's been fun to watch. Just from my perspective, the board Horned Frog Blitz get interested in women's basketball because you know what comes with that.
I do.
There's a lot,
I've seen it.
But it is fun to see the couple of folks who still have not watched the game in like my recap about Notre Dame. They're like, oh wow, like this is actually happening.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to check in and pay more attention. And so success breeds success.
Yeah.
But success also breeds eyeballs.
Yeah.
And for Mark Campbell and for this TCU women's basketball program and for generally the sport of women's basketball, more eyes is a really good thing. And the product that TCU is putting out on the court right now, I can't encourage folks enough to go and check out a TCU women's basketball game the next chance you get.
Don't think of it as women's basketball. Just think of it as basketball. You will be so entertained.
Oh, it is. It's wildly entertaining.
Everybody's like, oh, it's just women's basketball. No, like, first of all, stupid. Second of all, like, just if you go in, you're just a fan of basketball, this team, you will forget, like you will have no I think it's don't use your preconceived notions of a women's sport. Just go out and watch it because they press, they run, they shoot threes, they attack the paint, they block shots, they share the ball, they lead the country in assists. This is a very fun, and it goes so fast. The quarters are so much better than 20-minute halves. 10-minute quarters, so much better. The game moves so much more quickly. Yep. It's a blast. So I hope to see a lot of people out there Wednesday night. I get so excited for women's games. And then we're also covering the men's team, Jamie.
Yep. There was a question posed on the board this week, and it's one that I wanted to ask you. I can't remember. I should have written down who asked it because I thought it was a really interesting thought experiment. Is there going to come a point in time this year where attendance at women's games outpaces attendance at men's games?
I mean, I could see it. Now, I think you can't go like for like because I think when TCU plays, say, Baylor or one of the ranked teams in the Big 12 at home, the women, I could 100% see that being a larger crowd than, maybe the men playing a less exciting opponent, right? Like, I don't think you can go like Kansas or whatever.
Both Baylor teams are coming to Fort Worth this year.
Yes. Yeah. But I think that the men are always going to draw an opposing fan base for the big games, for Kansas, for Baylor, for Tech.
Sure.
So those are always going to be sellouts, no matter if TCU is good or bad. It's just a matter of what side the crowd favors. But I think the women have a chance of selling out or having a better crowd for maybe the more marquee games. Whereas I think some of the less enticing men's games could see a drop off if they don't kind of get things rolling. So I'll be interested. I think we've got Wednesday, Thursday this week, women, men, and
Both
obviously
on
the
Saturday.
Dickies both on Sunday.
Sunday.
Sunday, yeah. Vanderbilt for the men, which is not a huge draw, but is a good basketball game. And then the women, obviously, with South Carolina. So I think that's something that's going to be important to watch because this team the women get you to buy in, and right now I think the fan base is rightfully concerned about what this conference season could look like for the men after what we saw in Palm Springs.
Yeah, it's real bummer of a weekend for the men out in California, losing to Santa Clara again.
Again, yeah.
Via blowout again, 69-52. They go 1 for 17 from 3-point range, and that's the kind of, we talked about it before, boomer bust, right? Like, hey, when they're firing, they're going to be fun to watch, but when they're missing, they're not. Then they lose to Colorado State the next day, 76-72 in overtime. They get out-rebounded in both of those games. They've been out-rebounded in each of the last 4 games, and they're 1-3 over their last 4 games. Stagnant offense, bad defense. Even with Ernest Uday back, they got out-rebounded. Like, everything that we were concerned about going into this year cropped up in California for the Frogs. And the reality I think that we're facing with this team right now is that with 8 guys that are sophomores or younger, this is just kind of at the low end of the development cycle. And yes, it's the portal can have a bigger impact on hoops than pretty much any other sport, but you gotta. When you lose as much as TCU did last year, you can't just throw all your eggs in one portal basket because you have to have bodies, and I think that there's some challenges happening there. My biggest concern right now is that the 3 teams that they've played that are highest KenPom teams, Michigan at 21, Santa Clara at 81. And Colorado State at 110. They're 0-3 in those games. Yeah. And they've got Xavier coming up on Thursday this week, which is a top 25 ranked team, a top 30 KenPom team. And they got Vanderbilt coming on Sunday, like you mentioned, and they're 75th in KenPom. So this is we give I almost said Sunday Nights. We give Jamie Dixon a lot of criticism for soft non-conference schedules. He's scheduled by comparison, relatively challenging non-conference slate for his team this year in a year where they're young and inexperienced and have not played together, and they're 4-3. It could get sideways pretty dang quickly in non-conference, and then you're talking about a Big 12 slate like you mentioned. I just don't know.
I'm definitely concerned about what this team is going to look like at the end of conference play. I think going into this, I don't think you or I really thought this was even a fringe tournament team. Thought that, hey, if things break right, maybe they can be in the bubble conversation. But this is probably an NIT team at best. I think that's a fair evaluation for this year. But the problem now is that if the wheels totally come off here, like all of that development and that young team, how do you keep them together? Mm-hmm. Because if you can keep this group together, there's absolutely potential and room to grow. There's some talent on this team. There's some potential there. I love what David Punch is doing. I think that he's been really better than we could have hoped at this point, as we enter December. Vashana Lett obviously has some juice to him. I think that Brendan Wetzel is as good of a shooter as advertised. He was really the only one hitting against Colorado State. It seems like he's hit shots in big games. Frankie Collins has been great.
Yeah, I love Frankie. Frankie's been awesome. Sorry.
Yeah, no. But you're absolutely right. So there's some, and I can't remember. He's a junior, right? Is that correct? No, I think he's a junior.
He's done. This is his.
Is this okay? I couldn't remember if he was a junior or senior.
Michigan, then 2 years at Arizona State. Yeah.
So you're gonna lose him, but there's a lot to build around. But man, if things get bad, the portal giveth, the portal taketh away, and as Jamie Dixon, how do you get these guys to buy in beyond this year? Because I think that's what you have to start adjusting. And we've pushed him on this. He hates answering these types of questions. He'll tell you we had 82 practices to get ready, blah blah blah. I don't think he did anything wrong in preparing for this season. I think he's playing the hand he was dealt. I will say, I think if he were to go back in time, he probably would have recruited another big over signing another wing. I think that is a mistake. And I don't think he'll ever admit that to us, but I think he probably knows it in his heart. And maybe you play the portal a little bit differently, but at this point, your roster is what your roster is. I don't know that there's an issue with how they prepared for this season. I don't think that they didn't work on getting these guys ready. I just don't think. I think this is pretty much the ceiling of this team right now.
Yeah, hand he was dealt is a nice way to turn it there. I think, Melissa, he chose this hand. He did.
You're right.
He dealt it to himself.
You're right.
And I could see the vision, and you and I were texting about this during the Colorado State game, but I could see the vision this offseason with wanting to spread the floor, surround Uday with shooters, run some pick and roll, do a lot of what the women's team is doing with great success right now, by the way, playing an undersized four and spacing people out and making them pay. It's the same strategy, and we're seeing it be successful. So it's not like, oh, shame on the men's staff for wanting to do something that was never gonna work, because it does work when it's executed well. It does work,
and it helps when your average age of your roster is 22 and not probably 19.
That's the big difference, is that TCU and Mark Campbell are doing it with veteran players who have been there. Jamie's trying to do it with guys who were born yesterday. And that's a big challenge to get guys ready to play at this level, especially with how physical the game is right now. And we know that Big 12 refs let you play physical. What I would do, I'm not a coach, I would like to see over the last half of the non-conference slate, I would like to see David Punch play at the 4 alongside Ernest a little bit more. And this is something that I texted you about, because if your second tallest guy is your backup center and he's only 6'9", you're setting yourself up for a rough time on the glass. If you move Brendan Wenzel, not permanently to the bench or whatever, or as your sixth man, but just if you give 10 to 15 minutes a game of Punch and Uday together, and you have Wenzel at the 3 for 8 of those minutes, that's 6'8", 6'9", 6'11". And that's a little bit bigger than what we've been seeing. And it doesn't fully kill you from a shooting perspective. Punch has a little bit of range. He's got a pretty developed offensive game. Frankly, you can still space with him out to maybe, 15 feet, and have Uday run those high screens and still have enough room in the lane that things don't get too clogged up, especially if it's Wenzel and
Shauna Lett, Frankie Collins. That to me is your 5 best players right now.
No, let's give Noah Reynolds some credit.
He's been good.
He's been playing pretty well.
Yeah.
But I think that you've got to find a way to get more size in that front court. You have limited but some available bodies to make it happen. It probably means that you're going to be seeing more Malik Diallo, but if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I would personally be willing to not sacrifice. Malik's a good player. He's really young. He's raw. I'd be willing to see 5 to 6 Malik Diallo minutes per game if it meant we're seeing 8 to 10 minutes per game with Punch and Uday together, And I just think they've got to, it's already drawing board time, right? Where this is giving me shades of 2023 football with how this season could go if they don't start to adjust.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assertion. I totally agree and was right there with you. Punch and Uday need to play together. I think, Wenzel is your best shooter. If you're going to have 2 bigs, having that shooter on the floor with them is going to be critically important, so you can keep a driving lane open. They have to try something, and that's one of the things that I've admired about Mark Campbell. Man, he has played every iteration of his roster already this season. He has put everything on tape and made teams think about a lot of things.
Except for Maddie Shear. When's she going to be
back, coming
Melissa?
Back? But I think that's, Jamie Dixon has been doing this for a really long time, and he's had levels of success at multiple places that were unheard of, really in both places before he got there. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't know what the deep history of Pitt basketball is. But I know what the deep history of TCU basketball is, and it wasn't good.
No, it was not.
But, it's I think the parallel to TCU football is actually even more accurate than you probably intended. because he went heavy on big portal swings. Now he's got to keep those guys locked in so that you get the benefit of it a season later. And like, that's my thing. If if you say, hey, we're going to take our lumps, but these guys are bought in, and if they play together this year and we return most of these pieces for next year, now all of a sudden you've got a group that can make some noise potentially. You fill some gaps because you got to get another big, like that's, or maybe Diallo super develops and you're fine. But you can go and add a piece or two. You have to give credence to the fact that they had to add eight guys from the portal. And it's just
six, and then four freshmen, which is a big freshman class for where we are and just in the state of things.
I'd also like to see a lot more Micah Robinson. Speaking of freshman class,
truly, yes, I think he's got some. I think the way forward is punching Uday together, and hey, Micah, this might be a growth year for the program, but you're a cornerstone of it, and let's figure out exactly what you're capable of now. Yeah. So that we can set up a plan for you next year.
Let's not set him up to want to leave, because we've seen that happen with some really talented freshmen.
PJ Haggerty is a great example.
Yeah, that looked a little too much like freshmen for Jamie Dixon's liking. Micah has some juice. He's a dude, and he might be the most important dude on this roster going forward. He's the kind of guy I think guys are going to want to play with too. So it's like Punch is talented. Diallo we've talked about. I still believe in Isaiah Manning and Jace Posey. They have a lot of growing to do, but there's a reason they redshirted last year, right? Like there's growth opportunities there. But Micah has a chance to be a really special player. And I would if you're already gonna be kind of like, it's gonna be a rebuilding year, play the young dudes, let them get some run, let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's the best way to keep the core intact, right? You're losing Wenzel, Reynolds, Collins, and White. They're out of eligibility.
All of them are
after this year.
That does not make me feel better.
Like, let's just figure it out.
Yeah,
you gotta figure it out. All right, Melissa, I think that's going to do it for this extra long episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. Thank you to the Flying T Club. Thank you to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We will be back midweek with a two-parter, all-in-one show, just Melissa doing her thing and me doing mine. I'll be sitting down with Jeremy Clark, breaking down TCU's early signing day period, talking about this 2025 class, and then Melissa's got some guests that you'll know about when you know about. And until then, go Frogs.
Go Frogs.